True learning happens when you can explain an idea simply. True learning is often misunderstood. Many people believe learning means memorizing facts, repeating definitions, or scoring high on exams. However, the real test of learning is much deeper than recall. True learning happens when you can explain an idea simply, clearly, and without hiding behind complex words. This principle reveals the difference between surface-level knowledge and deep understanding. When someone memorizes information, the brain stores it temporarily. This kind of knowledge is fragile. It fades quickly, especially under pressure. But when a person understands an idea well enough to explain it in simple terms, the brain has processed that information deeply. It has connected new ideas with existing knowledge, formed logical structures, and created meaning. Meaning is what turns short-term memory into long-term memory. Explaining an idea simply forces the mind to organize thoughts. You cannot explain something clearly if your thinking is scattered or incomplete. As you attempt to explain, gaps in understanding become obvious. You realize where your logic breaks down or where your knowledge is vague. This moment of confusion is not failure. It is evidence that learning is in progress. Every time you identify and fix a gap, your understanding becomes stronger. Simple explanation also removes false confidence. Many learners believe they understand something because they recognize terms or can follow along while reading. This is an illusion of knowledge. Recognition is passive, but explanation is active. When you try to explain an idea without notes, you quickly discover whether you truly understand it or not. If you cannot explain it, you do not yet own it. Another powerful reason simplicity matters is communication. Knowledge that cannot be shared is incomplete. When you can explain an idea simply, you make it usable. You can apply it in real situations, teach it to others, and adapt it to new problems. This flexibility is a sign of real learning. Complex language often hides confusion, while simplicity reveals clarity. The human brain naturally prefers simplicity. It remembers clear ideas better than complicated ones. When you explain something in simple words, you reduce cognitive load and strengthen memory. Simple explanations often use analogies, stories, and real-life examples. These tools create emotional and logical connections, which help the brain store information more permanently. True learning is also honest learning. Explaining simply requires humility. It forces you to admit what you don't know and revisit weak areas. This honesty builds intellectual strength. Instead of avoiding difficult concepts, you face them directly. Over time, this approach builds confidence that is based on real understanding, not memorization. In essence, the ability to explain simply is proof that learning has moved from the page into the mind. It shows that information has been processed, understood, and integrated. This is why the greatest teachers, scientists, and thinkers focus on clarity rather than complexity. They know that simplicity is not a lack of intelligence, but the highest form of understanding. The idea that true learning happens when you can explain something simply also transforms how learning should be practiced. Instead of passively consuming information, this approach demands active engagement. Learning becomes something you do, not something that happens to you. This shift changes the brain from a storage device into a thinking system. When you attempt to explain an idea simply, you are forced to reconstruct it from memory. This process strengthens neural connections. Each time you recall and reorganize information, the brain reinforces those pathways. This is why people who teach or explain concepts tend to remember them for much longer. Teaching is not just sharing knowledge, it is deepening it. Simple explanation also improves problem solving. If you understand an idea at its core, you can apply it in unfamiliar situations. Memorized knowledge works only in familiar patterns. Understanding works everywhere. When faced with a new problem, A person who has learned deeply can adapt principles instead of searching for memorized answers. This flexibility is essential in real life, where problems rarely match textbook examples. This principle also protects against overload. Modern learners are surrounded by information. Trying to memorize everything leads to confusion and burnout. Explaining ideas simply forces prioritization. You identify what truly matters and discard unnecessary details. This clarity reduces mental clutter and increases focus. Learning becomes efficient instead of overwhelming. Another benefit is confidence. Many people fear speaking or explaining because they rely on memorization. Memorized knowledge feels unstable, so confidence disappears when pressure rises. But when understanding is deep, confidence becomes natural. You are not afraid of forgetting words because you understand the idea itself. This confidence is calm, not arrogant, and it grows with practice. Simple explanation also builds critical thinking. When you break ideas down, you question assumptions and examine logic. You stop accepting information blindly and start evaluating it. This habit protects against misinformation and shallow thinking. A person who can explain ideas clearly is less likely to be misled by complexity or false authority. Over time, this approach changes how the brain approaches learning entirely. Learning becomes an ongoing refinement process rather than a one-time event. Each explanation improves clarity. Each correction strengthens understanding. Knowledge evolves instead of remaining static. This is how experts are made, not by memorizing more facts, but by understanding fewer things more deeply. Ultimately, the ability to explain an idea simply is a lifelong skill. It applies to education, careers, communication, and personal growth. It helps you learn faster, remember longer, and think better. True learning is not measured by how much you know, but by how clearly you understand. When you can explain something simply, you prove that learning has become a part of you, and that is knowledge that lasts forever. Forget memorization. Focus on deep understanding. For many people, learning has always meant memorization. From school exams to competitive tests, success is often measured by how much information someone can recall in a short time. While memorization may help in passing tests, it rarely leads to lasting knowledge. Deep understanding, on the other hand, creates learning that stays, grows, and can be used in real life. Forgetting memorization and focusing on understanding is not just a better learning strategy, it is a complete shift in how the brain works with information. Memorization is fragile. It depends heavily on repetition and short-term memory. When information is memorized without understanding, it remains isolated in the brain. It is not connected to ideas, logic, or real-world meaning. This is why memorized facts are often forgotten soon after exams or assessments. The brain treats them as temporary data, not valuable knowledge. Deep understanding works differently. When you understand something, you know not just what it is, but why it works and how it connects to other ideas. This creates multiple mental links. The more connections an idea has, the harder it is to forget. Understanding transforms information into a structure, not a list. Structures are remembered far longer than isolated facts. Another major weakness of memorization is that it creates false confidence. A person may feel prepared because they can recall definitions or formulas, but this confidence collapses when the question changes slightly. Memorized knowledge is rigid. It works only in familiar formats. Deep understanding is flexible. It allows you to adjust, reason, and solve new problems because you grasp the underlying principles. Focusing on understanding also changes how mistakes are viewed. In memorization-based learning, mistakes are seen as failure. In understanding, based learning, mistakes are signals. They show where thinking is incomplete or flawed. This makes errors valuable. Each mistake becomes an opportunity to strengthen understanding instead of something to fear or avoid. The brain naturally prefers understanding over memorization. Humans evolved to recognize patterns, relationships, and causes, not to store random data. When learning is based on understanding, it aligns with how the brain is designed to function. This makes learning feel more natural and less exhausting. Memorization drains mental energy, while understanding builds mental clarity. Deep understanding also encourages curiosity. Memorization asks you to accept information as it is. Understanding invites questions. Why does this work? What happens if something changes? How does this relate to what I already know? These questions deepen learning and make it active rather than passive. In essence, memorization is about storing information, while understanding is about owning it. Stored information can be lost. Owned knowledge becomes part of how you think. When learning focuses on understanding, knowledge does not fade. It evolves. This is why true experts are not those who remember the most facts, but those who understand ideas at their core. Shifting from memorization to deep understanding does more than improve memory. It transforms thinking ability. When learners stop chasing facts and start building understanding, they develop skills that extend far beyond academics. This approach changes how problems are solved, how information is judged, and how knowledge is applied in real situations. One of the greatest benefits of deep understanding is transferability. Memorized knowledge stays locked in one context. Understanding travels. When you understand a principle, you can apply it in new environments, different fields, and unexpected situations. This is why people with deep understanding adapt faster. They are not searching their memory for exact answers. They are reasoning through problems using core ideas. This shift also reduces cognitive overload. In a world full of information, trying to memorize everything is impossible. Deep understanding allows you to focus on fundamentals. Once you understand the core, details become easier to absorb and remember. Instead of remembering hundreds of separate facts, you remember a few powerful ideas that explain many facts. This makes learning efficient and sustainable. Another powerful impact is long-term retention. Understanding strengthens memory because it creates meaning. The brain remembers meaning far better than repetition. When information makes sense, it sticks naturally. You don't have to force recall because the idea is logically connected to other ideas. Even if you forget a detail, understanding allows you to reconstruct it. Deep understanding also builds intellectual confidence. Memorization-based confidence is unstable. It depends on perfect recall. Understanding-based confidence is resilient. Even under pressure, you can reason your way forward. This confidence improves performance in exams, interviews, presentations, and real-life decision-making. This approach also develops critical thinking. Memorization trains acceptance. Understanding trains evaluation. When you focus on understanding, you analyze information instead of absorbing it blindly. You question sources, test logic, and identify inconsistencies. This skill is essential in a world filled with misinformation and surface-level knowledge. Over time, learning becomes enjoyable rather than stressful. Memorization feels like a burden because it requires constant effort to maintain. Understanding feels rewarding because it creates clarity. The moment something clicks in the mind is deeply satisfying. That satisfaction motivates further learning, creating a positive cycle. Forgetting memorization does not mean ignoring facts. Facts still matter, but they are learned through context and meaning rather than repetition alone. Understanding gives facts a place to belong. Once facts are part of a larger idea, they are easier to remember and harder to forget. Ultimately, focusing on deep understanding prepares the mind for lifelong learning. Information will always change, but the ability to understand will remain valuable. Those who rely on memorization struggle when knowledge evolves. Those who understand adapt effortlessly. Deep understanding turns learning from a temporary task into a permanent skill, and that is the foundation of true intelligence. Teaching reveals what you really know, and what you don't. Teaching is often seen as the final stage of learning, something done only after mastery is achieved. In reality, teaching is one of the most powerful tools for discovering how much you truly understand. The moment you try to teach an idea, your real level of knowledge is exposed. What feels clear in your mind may suddenly become confusing when you attempt to explain it to someone else. This is why teaching reveals both what you truly know and what you don't. When you study silently, your brain can hide behind familiarity. You recognize words, formulas, or concepts and assume understanding. This creates a false sense of confidence. Teaching removes that illusion. When you explain an idea aloud, you must organize your thoughts, choose the right words, and present ideas logically. Any weakness in understanding becomes immediately visible. If you cannot explain something clearly, it means your understanding is incomplete. Teaching forces active recall. Instead of passively reviewing notes, you must retrieve information from memory. This retrieval strengthens learning and exposes gaps. When you forget a step or struggle to explain a connection, you identify exactly where your understanding breaks down. These moments are not signs of failure, they are moments of clarity. They show you where learning must continue. Another reason teaching is so revealing is that it demands simplification. You cannot rely on complex language when teaching effectively. You must break ideas down into their core components. This process strips away unnecessary complexity and exposes confusion. If you truly understand something, you can explain it in simple terms. If you don't, complexity becomes a shield. Teaching removes that shield. Teaching also tests logical flow. Understanding is not just knowing pieces of information, it is knowing how they fit together. When teaching, you must present ideas in a sequence that makes sense. If the logic collapses, it shows that your mental structure is weak. This feedback is immediate and honest, unlike exams that may test only memorization. Even teaching an imaginary audience is enough to trigger this effect. Explaining an idea to an empty room, writing it down as if for someone else, or recording yourself teaching can reveal gaps just as effectively. The brain treats teaching as a high-level task, demanding clarity, accuracy, and coherence. Importantly, teaching shifts the learner's mindset. You stop asking, "Can I remember this?" and start asking, "Do I understand this well enough to explain it?" This question raises the standard of learning. It moves learning from surface-level familiarity to deep comprehension. In this way, teaching becomes a mirror. It reflects your true understanding without bias. It does not care how long you studied or how confident you feel. It only shows what you can clearly explain. That honesty makes teaching one of the most powerful learning tools available. Beyond revealing gaps, teaching actively strengthens understanding. Each time you teach an idea, your brain reorganizes and refines knowledge. Teaching is not just a test of learning, it is a method of learning itself. This is why people who teach consistently develop deeper mastery than those who only study privately. When you teach, you engage multiple cognitive processes at once. You recall information, structure it logically, translate it into simple language, and respond to potential questions. This multi-layered engagement creates strong neural connections. The brain treats taught information as important because it is used actively and meaningfully. As a result, taught knowledge is remembered longer and more clearly. Teaching also encourages ownership of knowledge. Memorized information feels borrowed. Under pressure, it disappears. Knowledge gained through teaching feels internal. You are not repeating words, you are expressing understanding. This sense of ownership builds confidence and mental flexibility. You are less afraid of forgetting because you know you can reason your way back to the idea. Another powerful effect of teaching is perspective. When you teach, you see ideas from the learner's point of view. This forces you to anticipate confusion and misunderstandings. In doing so, you deepen your own clarity. Explaining something to someone with no background requires a level of understanding that silent study rarely achieves. Teaching also creates continuous improvement. Each explanation reveals small weaknesses. Each correction strengthens understanding. Over time, knowledge becomes refined and precise. This process mirrors how experts are formed. They do not reach mastery in one moment. They achieve it through repeated explanation, correction, and refinement. This principle also removes fear from learning. Many people avoid teaching because they fear being exposed. However, exposure is exactly what makes teaching valuable. When gaps are revealed early, they can be fixed easily. Hiding confusion allows it to grow. Teaching turns vulnerability into strength by making learning honest and active. Teaching does not require authority or an audience. You can teach a friend, a child, or even yourself. The act itself is what matters. By explaining ideas regularly, you train your brain to think clearly and communicate effectively. These skills extend beyond learning into leadership, problem solving, and decision making. Over time, teaching changes how the brain approaches knowledge. Learning becomes interactive rather than passive. You no longer accept information without testing it. You automatically ask whether you could explain it. This habit protects against shallow understanding and builds intellectual discipline. Ultimately, teaching reveals truth. It shows what you know, what you don't, and what you need to improve. It turns learning into an active process of discovery rather than passive consumption. When you use teaching as a learning tool, knowledge stops being something you chase and becomes something you build. This is why teaching is not the end of learning. It is the path to mastery. Most people forget what they study. Richard Feynman didn't. And the reason wasn't intelligence, it was a simple formula anyone can use. You don't forget because your memory is weak. You forget because you were never taught how to learn. Feynman discovered a way to make knowledge stay forever. No cramming, no memorization, just deep understanding that never fades. If you can explain it simply, your brain will never forget it. This is the hidden formula that turned learning into mastery. If this changed the way you think, hit like. If you want to learn smarter, not harder, subscribe. And if someone you know needs this formula, share it with them. Keep your eyes open. More powerful formula is going to come in the next video.